Tonight, the Conservative Party decides who will be their new leader this weekend. We have a look at the candidates.
Keeping that in mind is that we do have different requirements, needs.
And back to school or not? Legal challenges for Quebec's back-to-school plan, while First Nations say they'll decide for themselves how to go back to class. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Federal Conservative Party will elect a new leader this weekend. The race to replace Andrew Scheer has come down to 4 candidates. They've spent months putting forth policy and speaking on issues. But where do they stand on Indigenous issues? To make that clearer, we're joined by Todd Lamoran from Ottawa. Todd?
Thank you, Dennis. The 2 frontrunners are former Member of Parliament and Cabinet Minister Peter MacKay and current MP Erin O'Toole. Another current MP running is Derek Sloan, while Toronto lawyer Leslyn Lewis fills out the field of candidates. Lewis has never held office and is the least known, so let's start there.
What kind of Canada do you want to live in? A country where everyone has access to clean water, clean air, and clean soil.
Lewis is a self-described social conservative who vows to make families the cornerstone of society. She's spoken out about systemic racism, saying Canadians don't understand a system like the Indian Act or the fact First Nations women are murdered and trafficked at higher rates than other women. But under the policy section of her website, only 3 paragraphs are devoted to Indigenous issues. A Conservative government will forge relationships that focus on meaningful results, clean drinking water in all communities, and being partners in energy projects which will provide better jobs. Derek Sloan is the most conservative candidate. Many of his policies, such as lowering immigration and classifying Antifa, a terrorist organization, are compared to Donald Trump's. Sloan's campaign website does not have any policies directed at Indigenous people. However, under Canadian sovereignty, he calls signing on to UNDRIP a mistake, saying it will undermine Canada's national economic interest and First Nations' ability to prosper through energy projects. During last February's emergency House debate, he had this to say about the rail blockade in Tyendinaga.
Those who want to protest may do so. Those who want to petition the courts may do so. But the law must be upheld. If it is not, what will stop this from happening again and again and again?
Peter MacKay was Justice Minister in 2014. Then calls for a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women had reached a peak. On March 6th of that year, MacKay infamously tossed some documents onto the floor of the House. They purported to show why an inquiry wasn't necessary. MacKay appears to have done a 180. He now wants to address the inquiry's findings with concrete actions. MacKay extols meaningful Indigenous engagement on environmental assessments of energy projects, but with hard time limits and clear criteria. During the Wet'suwet'en protests, he tweeted that land defenders were professional protesters and thugs, causing Anishinaabe Aski Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler to respond.
But for someone like Peter MacKay to spew that kind of rhetoric is dangerous, and it empowers people to feel and act the same way.
One, many are foreign-funded leftist radicals, and most are not Indigenous at all.
Erin O'Toole fashioned Tyendinaga blockade footage into a campaign video back in February. But he does have the most extensive Indigenous platform of the 4. His campaign website devotes an entire page called Igniting the Indigenous Economy. O'Toole wants to fund an RCMP Indigenous liaison officer, break the logjam on land claim settlements, and create land-based addiction treatment programs, just to name a few. O'Toole supported Bill C-92, the Indigenous Child Welfare Reform Act, but criticized provinces for being sidelined.
Called for collaboration between the provinces and territories. And that's something that hasn't happened in this bill adequately, Mr. Speaker, and that is a valid concern.
No matter who becomes leader, a possible Conservative government will get rid of Bill C-69. It promised more robust consultations on the environmental assessment of energy projects. Plus, they'll enforce the First Nations Financial Transparency Act. It's most famous for publishing the salaries of chiefs and councillors. We'll know the winner on Sunday. Back to you in Winnipeg.
Thanks, Todd. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is doubling down on defending his government's decision to prorogue Parliament and trigger a vote of confidence on the heels of the We controversy.
Responsible for us as a government to take a new tack, to put forward an ambitious plan for the future of this country and to support Canadians without presenting it to Parliament to ensure that we have the support of Parliament moving forward. That's why prorogation is a logical and reasonable step as we concentrate on the next steps in keeping Canadians safe.
The Liberals are set to deliver a new speech from the throne on September 23rd. Well, we'd like to hear what you have to say about the Conservative leadership race or the proroguing of Parliament. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news. Today in Quebec Superior Court, a human rights lawyer is challenging the province's back-to-school plan, saying it violates the fundamental rights of children. News that comes weeks after First Nations communities took the matter of back to school into their own hands. Lindsay Richardson reports.
Quebec insists, come September, it's time for kids to hit the books. But the province's back to school plan has compelled one lawyer to throw the book at them.
It's unreasonable to force people's conscience.
On Friday, lawyer Julius Gray filed a legal challenge in Quebec Superior Court, saying that forcing children into classrooms during a pandemic violates their charter rights.
This is a type of decision that should not be made by a minister based on regulations, but rather by each autonomous person.
The risk has not disappeared. Quebec just reported the first COVID-related death of a person under 20. In the United States, a reported 97,000 children contracted the virus when classes resumed. The Quebec Premier says it's about children learning to live again. But with the threat of a deadly virus looming, First Nations communities aren't taking any chances.
Keeping that in mind is that we do have different requirements, needs.
Kahnawake, near Montreal, will only be unveiling their back-to-school plan after surveying parents and community members.
On a prévu des masques, des visières.
The Atikamek community of Manawan stocked up on sanitary supplies, but they haven't received them, so reopening is delayed. They say getting teachers back to school is a challenge unto itself.
C'est sûr que les obliger à faire des choses contre leur gré, alors qu'on a peine à trouver des enseignants. Donc on a assoupli pas mal les mesures par rapport à ça.
For the Innu of Wahat Makmaniutnam, school begins August 31st. But students began a gradual return earlier this month to wrap up classes from last year. For the Algonquin in Pikagan, classes are already underway. Their education director says kids are adapting well to the new guidelines set forth by public health.
Suite la première journée, des fois, mettons, un adulte passait peut-être pas allait pas dans la bonne direction, puis l'élève le regardait en voulant dire t'es pas correct. Mais les enfants se sont adaptés tellement facilement. C'est plus facile avec des enfants qu'avec les adultes.
Despite insistence about adapting to the new normal, Gray says Quebec has little to no reason to object to plans put forth by First Nations.
I'd be surprised. I mean, I've been surprised before by government's tendency to meddle, but I think they would probably respect the First Nation schools.
He hopes the legal challenge will come before a judge within the next 2 weeks. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
Canada's top doctor is expressing concern over a spike in opioid-related deaths since the COVID pandemic began. Dr. Teresa Tam says public health efforts to help drug addicts have suffered a setback.
It is escalating as we speak. Some of the gains that were made prior to COVID-19 have unfortunately been lost, including statistics coming out of BC, Alberta, and many provinces showing that persons who use substances, who use drugs, are really negatively impacted as we are responding to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The federal government has launched a national consultation on supervised consumption sites with the aim of making them better. Meanwhile, the city of Saskatoon will be opening a safe injection site in the fall, making it Saskatchewan's first. This at a time when the province is seeing its most overdose deaths in a decade. Prairie Harm Reduction Organization hopes to be operating the site, located in the core area of the city, in October. Saskatchewan has the highest HIV rate in Canada, which is fueled by injection drug use. In the past 7 months, 40 people have died from drug overdoses in the province. The safe injection site will let people use drugs under the observation of a primary care paramedic. Charges have been laid in the murder of a 15-year-old girl from the Little Red River Cree Nation in northern Alberta. Roderica Ribbonleg was last seen July 15th in the area of John Doerr Prairie, about 750 kilometers north of Edmonton. A week later, her clothing was found in a forested area, which led police to her remains. On Wednesday, officers arrested Jason Alec Tallcree in John Doerr Prairie. Tallcree has been charged with first-degree murder. He's scheduled to appear in high-level provincial court on August 24th. Well, time for a quick break, but stick around. There's more to come. Here's a look at Saturday's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, showers and 22 for Halifax, 23 with rain for St. John's, 11 with rain in Nain, 19 and sunny for Le Grand River, 25 under sunny skies in Montreal, 21 in Chibougamau, 30 in Toronto, London, Sarnia, and Windsor. Showers and 22 for Thunder Bay, 24 with rain in Sioux Lookout, 10 in Churchill, 20 and partly cloudy for Norway House, 25 in Winnipeg and Barons River, 28 in Brandon, sunny and 30 for Regina and Swift Current, rain and 23 in North Battleford, 18 with rain in Uranium City, 17 in Stony Rapids. Welcome back. 30 years ago this week, the Canadian military went into Kahnawake and Kanesatake to end the Oka crisis, a crisis generated by a golf course slated to be built in their territory. Here's an encore presentation now of the story by Tom Fenario, told in the words of people who were there when the tanks rolled into Mohawk territory.
Well, we've got a lot of traffic problems this morning. For people who are just waking up, the Mercier Bridge has been blocked off by the Kahnawake Warriors. You cannot get anywhere near it.
I was on the bridge all summer. That's my home. That's my second home. The Mercier Bridge is a major artery to get traffic in and on the island of Montreal.
People had to go around. It took them, take 4 hours to get to Montreal.
And the whole reason we did that was to protect Kanesatake.
So everyone is angry and fed up with this bullshit that's going on.
The only thing that negotiations really focused on were the barricades at the Mercier Bridge.
We did clamp scrap metal on the side of the bridge and brought a torch up and start blowing sparks off. And all over the press, the Mohawks are cutting the bridge down. Essentially, that was the only thing that negotiations were about. They weren't about people leaving here peacefully. They weren't about no criminal charges. It wasn't about anything. It wasn't even about land.
Today is a breakthrough. Today we've agreed on preconditions.
Originally, we had a tentative agreement with Ellen Gabriel, which would have respected the Native people lands and would have put an end to the quarrel.
And John Chacha tried his best, but at that time and throughout the summer, nobody was controlling the SQ.
They were quite upset that They had tried to go into the community of Gunnesadage, and even more upset at the fact that one of their own got killed.
As soon as we went over the mountain, the SQ were there in an unmarked car.
One police officer who had an automatic weapon pointed about a foot from my head.
That was everyday life for most people. Anytime they would try to cross to go buy food or anything, they were treated poorly at all the checkpoints.
And he was shaking. He was shaking like this, and I got angry.
Make them undress in public to check that. Put greasy hands that they've dug in their car and putting it on somebody's clean white shirt.
I basically called him a few choice words, like an asshole, you know, and I said, put that gun down, let's go on shore, we'll see how tough you are, you know.
And they said, Mrs. Etienne, you are under arrest. And I said, well, what am I under arrest for? They said, for intimidation, because you're behind the barricades. I said, I live here.
The SQ didn't want a settlement because they wanted to force their way to tell the natives, this is what you have to do.
You could see the hatred and the anger of the police.
So how can you have a peaceful disengagement when the SQ are a law unto themselves?
On the other side, the radicals were expecting to negotiate terms and conditions which would have taken their lands out of the provincial jurisdiction and would have become an independent nation.
It was a farce. It wasn't a good situation, good circumstances, and we walked away from the table looking at it and saying, you know, these people want a war. That's what they want.
It was awful. It was awful. And I felt sorry for the Suffrage Quebec. So they were in an untenable situation, complete conflict in both ends.
We actually had a TV up on the bridge, and we were watching all the newscasts. We saw everything, and we saw what was going on. Of course, we were upset when they were burning effigies of Mohawks.
Premier Barraza didn't think that the SQ was equipped to deal with the situation. So he called Ottawa, and he called in the army.
And it sort of came out to us that the government brought the army in because they couldn't solve it. So if the army solved it, great. If the army screwed up, then we had somebody to blame.
Kahnawake were pretty much prepared for any incursion.
We did know that there were some weapons up on the bridge that were dangerous. One was a .50 caliber sniper rifle, and we were concerned about that because we didn't have anything to protect ourselves from that type of fire. Even our APCs, our armored personnel carriers, had breezed through that just like butter.
Our men have worked high steel since there's been high steel. So that gives us knowledge of bridges and structure.
Knowing what it takes to blow a bridge up, we sort of realized that it was more words. If you say you're going to do it, it's just like you're doing it. So it causes the same amount of fear amongst the people.
The outside knows that yes, it was wired to go at one time.
From a military standpoint, we knew exactly what it would take to put a bridge like that down, and there'd be truckloads of explosives.
Kahnawake has per capita for any community anywhere in the U.S. We have more military U.S. servicemen per capita here in this community. So training and knowledge is very diverse.
We had to avoid another death. We could not have lived down the idea that Native people were massacred or killed.
I was on the line. I didn't want to die, but if I had to protect those people.
The fear the soldiers had of having to use deadly force against Canadians, to them, I've spoken to guys who are really roughed up over the fact that, it could have come to that there.
We did what we had to do. The only thing I had to worry about is, am I getting shot today?
That gun down, we'll go for it. I'll kick the piss out of you, boy.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll take you to Caledonia for the latest on the ground there. Stick around. Here's a look at the rest of your Saturday weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 16 with rain for high level Fort McMurray and Fort Chip. 28 under sunny skies in Medicine Hat. 23 with showers in Edmonton. Sunny and 21 for Vancouver and Campbell River. 27 in Kamloops. Showers and 18 in Prince George. 14 with rain for Dease Lake. 22 in Old Crow and Mayo. Welcome back. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford weighed in on the 1492 Land Back Lane camp in Caledonia, Ontario at a press conference today. APTN's Elena McDougall has more.
Ministers Carolyn Bennett and Mark Miller have agreed to talk with land defenders. And today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau commented on the situation in Caledonia for the first time.
We know that reconciliation is something that matters to all Canadians, and all orders of government have their responsibilities toward that. I'm very pleased with the work that Ministers Bennett and Miller have been doing in this situation, engaging, listening and working together. But I also know that the province is taking this very seriously as well. We need to come together to find a peaceful resolution for this that involves the entire community, and I look forward to continuing to work seriously on finding the right path forward for everyone in the region.
Premier Ford weighed in on the situation in Caledonia yesterday, where he condemned any violence in response to Ontario Provincial Police presence on the ground. Police allege rocks were thrown at them 2 weeks ago while they enforced an injunction.
And I don't care who you are. You start attacking our police, I'll come out swinging. Simple as that.
Today, Ford stood by his comments.
But I'm a strong believer in collaboration, in sitting down, communicating. And as I mentioned to Chief Hill, which I have a tremendous amount of respect for, I sat down in my office, called him in immediately, and we had a phenomenal conversation on how we can work together and support each other.
Those at the 1492 Land Back Lane camp said in a statement Thursday evening that comments like Ford's are increasing the risk of vigilantism on the ground in Caledonia. They maintain that community consensus was not reached regarding the Mackenzie Meadows development.
Doug Ford and even Mayor Hewitt have come out and kind of supported police action against my people. And at the end of the day, like the developer here wouldn't have came to Six Nations offering any money if they had clear deed over the lands here. And so if the province and the municipality here are coming out to say, well, you need to check with the Indians first, then you need to come to the table with honest and real negotiations around what use of our lands looks like.
Land defenders have been at Mackenzie Meadows for 34 days now. Elena McDougall, APTN National News, Caledonia.
And you can catch up with the latest on what's happening in Caledonia by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. That's all the time we have for the show this Friday. Be sure to tune in Saturday for APTN National News Weekend. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.